Well, sharing a campaign stage for the first time since the presidential race, Barack and Michelle Obama were out there urging a 35,000-strong crowd in Ohio State to keep believing. Let's be honest, this is a difficult election, the president told the crowd, and plenty of reasons for that are obvious. Democrats are outspent by Republicans, right-wing money bombs are flooding the airwaves with anonymous messages. But here's a story that didn't get much play this week. Even as at least 40 House Democrats and all but 2 candidates for Senate are being outspent by Republicans, the Agenda Project, a New York-based public policy institute, says top Democrats are hoarding cash, $100 million of it owed to the DCCC that could be out there being used to fight. In fact, more than 70% of House members, 155 out of 186, are deadbeat Dems. So what are voters to believe? Is it the message or the money? The Nation's D.C. editor Chris Hayes and Erica Payne, founder and executive director of the Agenda Project, join me next.
So in 2 weeks, you've got the chance to say once again, yes, we can. Now, look, let's be honest. This is a difficult election. This is hard. And it's hard because we've been through an incredibly difficult time as a nation. We've gone through a tougher time than any time in the lifetimes of most of you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me, both of you. I'm very glad to have you. Erica Payne of the Agenda Project. First, talk a little bit about what you found and why you released it right now.
Sure. What we found basically a document we weren't supposed to find. And the document shows all of the House members and what they owe the DCCC for their pledge to having written a check. And then they also have a pledge that they're supposed to raise, and then also an amount of cash on hand. And so there are a few different kinds of deadbeats that we found. One is a group of Dems who've not paid their dues. And when you just add up those dues, the dues they're behind on, it's about $24 million. And then the amount that they haven't raised. And then if you look at their coffers as a whole, there's about $225 million sitting in there unused. And if you just take out the competitive seats, even very conservatively, New York Times Magazine estimated there's about $100 million that could literally be deployed tomorrow with a check.
All right, so Christopher, you've got the Obamas out there on the campaign trail, and they're not alone, really pushing hard, trying to amp up the message, amp up the support, believing now, go back to believing. What are we supposed to believe?
Well, I mean, part of the problem, right, is that you have this jerry-rigged system in the House in which, the majority of seats on both sides are essentially safe seats where you have incumbents that are essentially perpetual incumbents for life, some of whom are great. I mean, some of whom have fantastic politics because they come from very liberal districts, but who can just sit on cash. And the reason they want to hoard that cash is because one of the sort of dysfunctions and pathologies of the current system is if you amass enough cash, you can scare off potential challengers and make your life easier. So rather than sort of allocating the resources in the most efficient means possible, try to win these marginal seats, there's an interest on behalf of people who are already in safe seats just to make sure they have enough cash that they ward off any potential challengers in the future. It's a real problem.
But Henry Waxman's on your list, Erica. He may be in a safe seat, but he really likes that chairmanship. Does he not care that his party could lose it?
He does. I mean, the psychology of this is very confusing to me. When you're going to go out, Congress people constantly complain about how much time they have to spend raising money, and then you have the chairman of one of the most powerful committees who obviously would like to retain his chairmanship sitting on, our study showed a little bit over $1 million. He could easily deploy that. There are also 6 or 7 Democrats who are retiring, who they changed the law a few years ago, so they can't take it with them. So I fail to understand why they're not putting it to good use.
All right, so you called them, you tried to find out. What did they say?
Well, I haven't called them, and so I will call them. But what I was actually going to do later on today is release this set of phone numbers of all of the people with the figures out to the universe, and I'll post it with y'all and post it with the nation, because what I'd like to do is have Democrat funders who have funded all of these individuals to call them. I think they'll be a pretty good voice.
I could imagine they're really wishing this article didn't appear, Christopher. Is it too late to change any of this right now?
Well, it's not too late. I mean, there's still a window. What do we have, 23 days or something until the elections? There's still a window to get money into the hands of the races that need it and to get airtime. This is actually what Erica is pointing to has been a perpetual problem in the past. In previous cycles, Marcos at Daily Kos and other folks have looked at similar kind of numbers, and it's been a perpetual problem. I think part of what you're seeing also is there tends to be an asymmetry in how tightly Democrats and Republicans enforce these kind of collective action problems, right? So there's the problem that, liberals preach solidarity and conservatives practice it. I think in the past you've seen Republicans are much better and much less delinquent in their dues paying than the Democrats have been, and it's a serious issue, but there is really still time to fix it. I mean, 3 weeks is enough time to get money into the hands of the races that need it and to get ads up on the air.
All right, quick final comment on this part of the story.
It's unconscionable. I mean, this is not something that is, relax on some dues. This is the control of the House of Representatives is potentially sitting in the hands of the people who are in the House of Representatives. So they're telling a whole lot of people, what they can do with it. Their members, the American people, the Obama administration. I mean, this is pathetic.
Meanwhile, they're calling voters in states all around the country.
Meanwhile, they're calling donors all over the place for $50, for $2,400 a pop. It's pathetic.
Let's talk about the subject that got more attention than the money, particularly this part of the money in the weekend's news, and that's the question of message. You've got the Obamas out there on the campaign trail trying to sort of revive the campaign messaging of the election, the presidential election. And then you have candidates at the congressional level taking a very different approach. Here's the latest ad from Joe Sestak running for Congress in Pennsylvania.
I'm Joe Sestak, and this is Belle. My family loves Belle, but she can make a mess, and we have to clean it up. I think about Belle when I see Congressman Toomey's ads attacking me. It made me sick to bail out the banks. But I had to clean up the mess left behind by these guys. They let Wall Street run wild. Now Pat Toomey is attacking me for cleaning up his mess. I authorize this message because we deserve leaders who solve problems instead of playing politics.
Now, it's a Senate campaign, of course, my mistake there, but it reads kind of like a congressional campaign in the sense that it's totally local, it's kind of small bore. Chris, what's your take on Sestak's new message?
Well, look, it perfectly embodies the problem that so many Democrats have. One is that a lot of because you have more Democratic incumbents, you have Democratic incumbents facing challengers, and the dynamics of races like that, which played to the benefit of the Democrats in 2006, is that the incumbent has a record that you can attack and the challenger doesn't. So in the case of Rand Paul, you can, Jack Conway, who's running against Rand Paul in Kentucky, is running this crazy and sort of abhorrent ad about his, supposedly anti-Christian beliefs, but there's no votes that Rand Paul took to go after him at. Whereas the incumbents who all took that vote on TARP, on the bailout, they all had that hanging around their neck. That's a bullseye painted on them. And you're seeing in race after race after race, Joe Miller in Alaska and in other places where challengers who are outside the political system are using the votes that the incumbents took against them in a really effective way. But
don't you need somebody, particularly who's running for Senate, Erica, to say what they think could be done instead, or at least what their party is planning to do instead, or running on the record of their party on big stuff, healthcare, you name it? Where is that?
I mean, how Democrats feel is that they can't run on the big stuff because the big stuff is not popular. And what you found in all the healthcare polling is that the bill as a whole is not popular, but some of the pieces of it are popular. And the votes that we need to get out in the next 2 weeks are African Americans and women primarily. And they're just not using messages that are going to appeal to those two groups. So I would suggest they switch immediately to minimum wage and abortion in the cases of rape and incest.
Well, this is what Robert Gibbs said this weekend, and I'd love your take on it, Chris. Take a look.
Look, I think that campaigns in this cycle are being run on a lot of local issues and issues that are important not nationally but to individual states and individual congressional districts. I think our candidates have done a remarkably good job in a tough political environment. And I think that come election night, we'll retain control of both the House and the Senate.
It does sound like that's the White House spokesperson just doesn't get what Erica is saying.
Well, I think that's partly true. I mean, I think they've done a horrible job just politically at kind of maintaining a relationship with the base and a kind of bilateral reciprocal relationship in which they listen to the base, they give them things, there's a kind of open channels of communication. But I also think that everybody is focused at this point on message in a way that, look, 90% of this outcome is being determined by things other than message. I mean, maybe even 95%. The economy sucks. I mean, the country is in a terrible state, and that the incumbent party that controls both houses of Congress and the White House in conditions in which you have nearly 10% unemployment, record foreclosures, and personal bankruptcy is going to get shellacked. I mean, so all this and this long Peter Baker profile in the New York Times Magazine about, you know, what message has gone wrong. At the end of the day, what's driving this election are the facts on the ground, the objective conditions of the country, which remain really poor.
Well, we're still going to have Barack Obama in the White House no matter what happens after November. That profile in the New York Times was disconcerting in the sense that it suggested the lessons the White House is learning from the last 2 years is to conciliate more to the right. Did I read that wrong, Erica?
Well, I mean, one lesson I can't believe Rahm Emanuel didn't learn when he was in the Clinton White House is how big a structural disparity there is between the left and the right, with the array of think tanks that were funded, incidentally, by the Chamber of Commerce. Everybody's, you know, concerned about the foreign money that's coming out right now, but the array of think tanks and legal advocacy groups and media monitoring groups and things like that, which Hillary Clinton called the vast right-wing conspiracy, which Rahm Emanuel lived through. And then he walked into an Obama White House, and how they were taken aback by the structural disparity was sort of beyond me.
Well, there's going to be more on the chamber coming up on Grit TV later this week, so I look forward to that. Very quickly, Chris, we've got about 30 seconds, but what was your takeaway from your trip to Israel-Palestine last week?
Well, it was deeply affecting, and the biggest takeaway is that the current status quo is totally untenable and cannot endure. And whatever peace there is now, peace in quotation marks, is, you know, might be an absence of violence, but it's nothing sustainable. The conditions of occupation in the West Bank are just cannot endure, and things have to change. All
right, people can find Chris's letter from Hebron at the Nation magazine website, and Erica Payne's report there too. That's thenation.com. Thanks for watching, both of you. Well, thanks for being with us, and thanks for watching, you all.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.